I never truly believed the warnings about working the night shift at ValueFresh until the night that changed everything. The night I realized that some places aren't just old or quiet at night. They're alive in ways you can't understand until it's too late. The store had been around for decades, a relic of a time when fluorescent lights buzzed endlessly and floors creaked under the weight of countless shoppers. And even during the day, there was an unsettling feeling that clung to it like a second skin. At night, it transformed into something else entirely. That night, I arrived at 11, keys in hand, ready for another long shift, ignoring the uneasy feeling in my stomach as the automatic doors closed behind me with a hollow, echoing thud. The first hour passed uneventfully, just me stacking shelves and occasionally glancing at the security monitors that covered every aisle, though they never quite seemed to capture everything. Sometimes the corners of the cameras were too dark, too shadowed, and I could swear I caught movement just outside the edges of the frame, movement that disappeared whenever I looked directly at it. Around midnight, the store grew even quieter than usual. No delivery trucks, no distant voices from the parking lot, just the hum of the refrigerators and the occasional soft squeak of my own shoes on the tile. I remember thinking, almost jokingly, that it was too quiet, that silence in a place like this at night was unnatural, but I laughed it off, telling myself I was just imagining things after working too many nights in a row. Then, at exactly 2:38 a.m., the speakers crackled to life on their own, and a voice I recognized immediately for its sterile mechanical tone announced, "Attention shoppers, the store is now closed." I froze because, first, there were no shoppers, and second, the system was manual. No one was in the office, and the manager's shift ended hours earlier. I told myself it was a glitch, a power surge, anything to convince myself it wasn't the beginning of something far worse. I walked toward aisle 4 to finish stocking frozen vegetables, but the air had grown inexplicably cold, and my breath fogged in the dim emergency lighting, forming ghostly clouds that hung and drifted like smoke. That's when I noticed them, the wet footprints, bare and disturbingly human, leading from the dairy section to the freezer area. At first, I thought it was a prank, maybe the security guard testing some new equipment or some leftover from a delivery, but the prints didn't make sense. They stopped abruptly, as if whoever had made them had simply vanished into thin air, leaving no sign of how they could have disappeared. My stomach twisted when I remembered the text I had received earlier from a guard, something I had ignored at the time. "Don't go to the back room." I tried to shrug it off, telling myself it was just a joke or some stupid prank, but deep down, a cold dread was settling in my chest, crawling up my spine like icy fingers. I glanced around, the fluorescent lights flickering intermittently, and for a moment, I could swear I saw a shadow out of the corner of my eye, a figure standing at the end of the aisle just beyond the freezer doors. I spun around, but there was nothing, just empty shelves and the dull hum of the refrigeration units. My heart raced, and I told myself to calm down, that I was imagining things after too many nights in the store, but the unease only grew stronger. Every sound became amplified. The distant buzz of the soda cooler, the faint drip of condensation somewhere in the produce section, the soft, almost imperceptible scraping of what could only be a cart moving on its own somewhere in the darkness. I stopped mid-step and listened, my pulse hammering in my ears, and that's when I heard it. A low, deliberate scraping sound, slow and measured, coming from the freezer doors, a sound that didn't match any cart or machine in the store. My instinct screamed at me to run, to leave immediately, but a part of me, the part that had always been too curious, too stubborn, forced me to take another step forward. The footsteps, or whatever it was, stopped as suddenly as they had begun, and silence returned, heavier this time, suffocating, pressing against me from every angle. I forced myself to move toward the source, heart pounding, each step echoing loudly in the empty store, the air growing colder with every stride. As I neared the freezer aisle, the lights flickered violently, and in that brief moment of darkness, I could swear I saw something move, a shape barely human, blurred at the edges, standing in the corner of the aisle, watching me. My breath hitched, and I stumbled backward, nearly colliding with a shelf. And when the lights returned, the aisle was empty again. That's when I noticed the temperature reading on the wall-mounted monitor. -15 degrees Fahrenheit, far below normal. And yet, There were no alarms, no system warnings, just a freezing cold air that seemed to reach inside me and settle into my bones. I wanted to leave, to run straight to the exit, but the feeling that something was wrong, that I was being watched, kept me rooted in place, heart hammering, sweat dripping from my temples despite the cold. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, and then I heard it, a voice low and deliberate, coming from somewhere I couldn't place, whispering, "Are you here for the night shift too?" I spun around, heart racing, but no one was there. I backed toward the exit, my mind racing, try to convince myself that it was a prank, a hallucination, anything but what it felt like the store itself had become aware of me, like it was waiting, breathing, watching, and I had crossed some invisible boundary by staying past closing. By the time I reached the front doors, I was trembling, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key in the lock. And when I finally stepped into the cold night air of the parking lot, the normalcy of cars and streetlights felt wrong, too quiet, as if the darkness inside the store had followed me, lingering behind my back, waiting for me to look over my shoulder. And though the night seemed ordinary outside, I couldn't shake the certainty that I had seen something that shouldn't exist, that aisle for held secrets older than the store itself, and at the moment I stepped inside for the night shift, I had already become a part of it, whether I realized it or not, whether I wanted to or not. By 2:41 a.m., the store had grown even colder, so cold that it felt like the air itself had weight, pressing down on my shoulders and making each breath a struggle. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigeration units, but now it was distorted, deeper, almost like a low growl vibrating to the tile floor, as if the store had a heartbeat I had never noticed before. I tried to focus on the exit door ahead, thinking that once I reached it, I could finally leave this nightmare behind. But as I stepped into aisle 4, the lights flickered violently again and I froze. There he was, or it, a man standing at the far end of the aisle. He wore a store uniform, old and faded, like it had come from the 1990s, and at first, I thought it was a mannequin someone had left behind. But then I noticed the way he moved, or rather, didn't move. His presence was unnatural, almost as if he wasn't fully there. His face was a blur, smeared, impossible to look at directly, and even from that distance, I felt the weight of his gaze, heavy and accusing. My stomach turned to ice, and I took a step backward, almost tripping over a fallen display. But something inside me, a mix of curiosity and terror, kept me rooted, unwilling or unable to run. Then I heard it, the whisper that made my blood run cold. "Are you here for night shift too?" It wasn't loud, just enough to crawl into my mind and make my own thoughts feel alien, like someone else had taken over my consciousness for a second. I spun around frantically, heart hammering, but the aisle was empty again. Nothing but frozen vegetables staring at me with an eerie, unnatural stillness. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I had seen, to tell myself it was just exhaustion, that I had been staring at a shadow for too long, that the fluorescent lights were playing tricks on me. But then the footsteps started, slow, deliberate, echoing through the empty store, though when I turned to follow them, there was nothing. They came closer, moving around me, circling, and each step sounded heavier than it should have, like someone dragging a weight that shouldn't exist. I ran, my shoes slipping on the wet floor, the echo of those steps chasing me down the aisles as if they had a mind of their own, and I barely made it to the emergency exit near the back of the store. I pulled on the door handle and pushed, but it wouldn't budge. My chest tightened as panic set in. The door that should have been my escape was now locked, trapping me inside with whatever was stalking me. I pounded on it, shouting, but the store swallowed my voice, turning it into a hollow echo that returned to me, twisted and unrecognizable. And then I saw him again. He wasn't moving toward me like a normal person would. Instead, he was simply there, at the end of the aisle, watching unblinking, his blurred face impossible to decipher, but I could feel his eyes burning through me, burning into me. My hand shook as I fumbled for my phone, hoping to call someone, anyone. But there was no signal, no reception, as if the store itself had severed me from the outside world. The lights flickered again, and I swear for a moment, the whole store seemed to pulse, the walls breathing, the shelves bending slightly in ways that defied physics. I tried to remind myself that this was impossible, that stores don't come alive, that I was just scared and tired, but the sound of soft whispers around me, too faint to understand, convinced me otherwise. They weren't coming from the speakers or any human source. They were in my head, subtle at first, then louder, repeating my name in 1,000 variations, like the store itself was speaking to me, taunting me. I backed toward the produce section, every instinct screaming to run. But the further I moved, the more the aisle seemed to stretch and twist, impossible angles appearing where they shouldn't, creating new paths that led nowhere. I could see my own reflection in the polished freezer doors, pale and wide-eyed, but behind me, in the reflection, there was another figure, slightly taller than me, standing perfectly still, and I hadn't noticed anyone in that space when I turned around. The whispers became words. The night shift never ends, and a low, dragging sound joined them, like nails scraping the floor, coming closer and closer. I ran blindly through the aisles, slipping over spilled products, knocking over boxes, desperate to escape, and every time I thought I saw the exit, it would vanish, replaced by more frozen shelves, more dark corners, more of those smudged faces and reflections, staring silently. My heart raced so fast I could hear it in my ears, each beat echoing like a drum, a warning. Finally, I reached the office, hoping for the keys, hoping for a safe place, but the office was empty, chairs knocked over, papers scattered as if a hurricane had passed through, and in the corner, there was a small monitor still flickering, showing the security footage from the cameras. I couldn't stop staring. There at the end of aisle 4, I saw him again, perfectly still, facing the camera. Then the view switched to a different angle, and I froze. Behind him, moving slowly but deliberately, were dozens of shadowed figures, blurred faces like his, all wearing old uniforms, all drifting silently through the aisles as if they were waiting for me. I turned to run out of the office, but the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, and I was trapped. I could hear the scraping of footsteps circling me, closer, whispering my own name, mocking me. My chest tightened so much it hurt to breathe, and for the first time, I realized that whatever this place was, it didn't just haunt the store, it controlled it. It could manipulate space, sound, perception, everything around me. The emergency lights flickered one final time, revealing the pale, blurred face of the man right in front of me, almost inside me, and then everything went dark. For what felt like hours, I was trapped in that darkness, hearing only whispers, scraping, the soft shuffling of those ghostly employees moving around me, surrounding me, waiting. I don't know how long I was unconscious, or if time even existed the way it should in that place. But when the lights flickered back on, I found myself near the front door, panting, drenched in sweat, the normal sounds of the parking lot outside somehow piercing through the store. I ran out without looking back. But even as I reached the quiet streets, the memory of that blurred face and those endless footsteps has stayed with me. I have never returned to ValueFresh, but sometimes, late at night, I can hear the faint hum of that freezer, feel the cold pressing down on me, and I remember the voice that whispered, "Are you here for night shift too?" And I know that whatever I saw, whatever chased me through the aisles, is still there, waiting for the next person foolish enough to work alone after dark. The next day, after I had fled ValueFresh and convinced myself I would never return, the manager called me into the office, acting calm, almost too calm, as if nothing at all had happened the night before. And when I stepped inside, my stomach dropped at the sight of security monitors lined up on the wall, each one flickering and showing a perfect, normal view of the empty store. Every aisle orderly, every freezer stocked, and for a moment, I felt a strange relief, telling myself that maybe, just maybe, I had imagined an entire nightmare, that exhaustion and stress had twisted my perception until my own fear had created phantoms. But that relief vanished the instant I saw the footage from aisle 4. The footage that froze me in place, heart hammering, breath caught in my throat, and stomach twisting into knots. Because there I was, standing at the end of the aisle exactly at 2:41 a.m., motionless, pale, wide-eyed, the way I remember myself fleeing the dark, but impossibly still, and behind me, slightly blurred in the reflection of the freezer doors, was a man, the same uniform, the same distorted, smeared face, the same impossible presence that had haunted me the entire night, leaning toward the camera as if acknowledging that it claimed me, whispering something I couldn't hear but felt deep inside my chest, a pressure that made my blood run cold. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the office chair, and the manager, unervingly composed, brushed it off, telling me it was probably a glitch in the cameras, a technical issue that the security company would fix. But I knew better. Glitches don't mimic the living, don't mirror your terror, don't make your reflection twist into something you can't recognize. I tried to speak, to explain, but my words caught in my throat as my mind flashed back to the aisles, the whispers, the scraping footsteps, the feeling of being circled, stalked, hunted by someone that was not alive and yet not dead, a presence that used the store as its body, its playground, its trap. I remember asking the manager if the security guard had mentioned anything odd before the shift, and he shrugged, uninterested, dismissing it as the usual paranoia of night shift workers. But I knew better. He knew better, because he had seen the footage too, and yet his calm, composed expression made it clear that acknowledging it would be dangerous, that admitting the store's secret would be unthinkable. I left the office as quickly as I could, but something had changed. The world outside ValueFresh felt wrong, untrustworthy, as if the air itself carried remnants of the cold, distorted energy from inside the store. That night, unable to sleep, I checked my phone obsessively, scrolling through news feeds, social media, even security forums to see if anyone else had reported anything strange. But nothing came up, no reports, no sightings, no warnings, just the same sterile normality that made my memory of the night feel like a waking dream, except it wasn't a dream, and I knew it. Weeks later, while working a late shift at another, newer supermarket, a sudden chill washed over me. The lights flickered, and for the briefest instant, I thought I saw a shadow at the end of aisle 7, one that moved just like him, just like the man with the blurred, smeared face, watching, waiting, and I froze, heart hammering, breath caught in my throat, and then I heard it. The faintest crackle over the store speakers, barely audible, a low mechanical hum, followed by the words, "Attention shoppers." And in that moment, my blood ran cold, because the voice wasn't robotic. It sounded like mine, my own voice, echoing from the speakers, warped and slow, impossible, and I felt my stomach drop as the realization hit me like a punch. I was not free. Not really. A part of me had stayed behind in ValueFresh. Trapped in the aisles, caught in the loop of the night shift, the same eternal cycle that claimed the security guard, that twisted a man's face into something monstrous and distorted, and I could feel in my bones the cold, relentless presence of the store reaching for me, tugging me back toward it, whispering my name, dragging me back into the dark corridors of frozen vegetables, endless shelves, and impossible aisles. Every night since then, I hear it, the faint echo of my own voice, sometimes in the middle of the night at home, sometimes through the intercom of the stores I work at, and I know I can't escape, because the store doesn't exist in one place or one time. It exists wherever the night shift calls, wherever fluorescent lights flicker, wherever the cold hum of refrigeration turns into a pulse that reaches into your mind. I can still see him sometimes in reflections, in windows, blurred and smeared, always watching, always waiting. And I realize now that those who went on the night shift are never really alone, never really free, that the store takes a piece of you, holds it, and uses it to trap the next worker, the next victim, the next soul foolish enough to step into the frozen aisles when the last customers have gone home. And so I tell you this, whoever is listening, whoever is working alone at night, if you ever hear the intercom crackle on, if you hear a mechanical voice call your name, if you see shadows and a reflection of freezer doors, do not answer, do not turn around, do not acknowledge it. Because the night shift never ends, and the store doesn't forget. The same way it kept me, part of me is still there, trapped in the endless aisles, forced to walk forever under flickering fluorescent lights, listening to whispers, watching new workers, waiting for the next foolish soul to enter the haunted supermarket, and I fear that one day, someone will see me there, in the frozen reflection, and they will mistake me for real, not knowing that I am already gone, already part of the darkness that owns the night shift, and that, in some twisted way, I will never escape, and neither will they.